So, Andy, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you on. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. I've got a bit of a cold, so apologies to
Yeah,
anyone listening for my nasal tones. But apart from that, all good.
likewise. So you're going to hear it from both of us. Anybody who's listening. I always like to go back to the start when I talk to somebody. When, what sparked your interest in filmmaking, and when did you, I guess, know that it was a viable career or something that a space you wanted to kind of live in?
Um, those 2 points are very, very far apart. Um, I can pinpoint when I was, first started to get interested in film, and it was when I watched Star Wars as a kid. I saw that at the cinema, not the first time round. I'm not that old, but I saw that when I was about four, in a double bill, Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. I remember getting all the toys afterwards, but then I used to be really interested in how it was put together. So I had like the books on the making of, um, and everything like that. So that kind of sparked my interest. Not only was I interested in the world, but also how on earth was it made? Because at first, when you're like four, you like, did they get spaceships and they flew them into space and filmed that? How did they do it? And then you kind of figure out all the models and everything. So yeah, I was just interested in the process since then. But obviously, I was growing up in Birmingham, in the UK. There's no filmmaking kind of world there whatsoever. So it kind of seemed like a pipe dream, really. Um, and then the sort of second influential thing, I guess, in filmmaking was when I was kind of early-ish mid-teens, and I started going and hiring things out from the video shop, and I'd get things like Evil Dead, and the early Peter Jackson films, Bad Taste, Brain Dead. And not only were they films that were, you know, kind of fun and exciting and scary, but they also had that sort of homemade quality. And so for the first time, pre to that, I just watched Hollywood films. And you think, well, there's no way some kid from Birmingham could ever make Star Wars. But you watch Evil Dead and you go, oh, actually, I can see the joins on this, and that's part of the attraction. Maybe we could do something. Um, and then fast forward probably another 20 years. I've done various jobs. I've worked in all kinds of different careers, trying to find out what I wanted to do. But still kind of always interested in films. I've been making shorts and stuff on the side. Um, and then I made a bunch of zombie shorts. Um, and that led to doing Ibiza Undead, which was the first feature I'd done. And then I was like, that's it then. This is all I want to do. Let's try and make this a career.
What was that process like from making shorts? Because I feel like a lot of filmmakers always say, like, it's probably key and it's a really good idea to, if this is something you're interested in, is to just get out there and make something, whether it be shorts, get involved in somebody else's shorts and kind of help out and get involved. To go from that then to shooting something like Ibiza Undead, or is it's known as another name as well? Is that in a different region? It
Oh
has
yeah, so Ibiza Undead is its UK title. It was called Zombie Spring Breakers in the US. Because I think the idea was Americans wouldn't know where Ibiza was. Um, but obviously they know what Spring Break is. Um, it's called Ecstasy of the Dead in Japan. It's known by various things. So I'm not too sure what it's known as in Ireland. Actually, I don't know what they released it
I
as.
yeah, I think it's Ibiza Undead, but I had seen as well it referenced as Zombie Spring Breakers a
Yeah,
few.
Zombie Spring Breakers was its US title. Yeah. Um, I mean, with that, it was a case of I just kind of upped the production value. So like so I did a series of shorts under the name House Party of the Dead, and they're all on YouTube or Vimeo somewhere. If anybody does want to kind of see the evolution, and the first one we shot in my flat in London, just in an afternoon, and we were drunk, and some people were stoned, and we had ketchup for blood. And then by I think House Party 6, they're all like 10 minutes long. We had maybe 50 extras. Um, we had a crane. We had professional makeup artists. Um, and one of the guys who shot it, a guy called Evan Bolter. It was one of his first movies. One of his first shorts that he ever shot. He's now just winning Emmys because he's been shooting The Last of Us for HBO. Um, so we had some talented people on that. And then after doing that, those kind of 6 shorts, building up the production values each time, I was like, right, let's try and make a feature now. And because I've been doing about all these zombies at house parties was essentially the premise of House Party of the Dead series of movies, series of short films. I was like, okay, well, where would you have a good house party? Ibiza, and then
It's yeah.
off the back of that. So it entirely came from that, and it was kind of working on that. Do what you know you can do. I know, after doing that, it was almost my film school making those short films, and I was like, okay, I know zombies. I know I can handle zombies and crowds, and I know how it all works. You know, trust me to kind of do an hour and a half of that.
Would you say that the most important aspect of that process um, is actually having the passion and the creativity for it? Like you mentioned, being in your flat and like maybe you guys are having a few drinks or whatever, and it's like, yeah, let's make a short and let's use ketchup and let's use this and we'll work with that. And is that the key to filmmaking to an extent? Is having that like
Yeah,
off the cuff? Okay, let's just do this.
yeah. I mean, you've got to love it because it's kind of hard work. And when somebody gets on a film set for the first time and it's 18 hours in a field somewhere covered in blood, people either love it and go, "This is what I want to do for the rest of my life," or people go, uh, "What on earth are you doing? This is madness." There's so many better jobs to do. Um, and just that kind of ingenuity that you learn making shorts for no money, that helps you. I'm still making low budget films, and there's always problems to be solved. Filmmaking is largely problem solving. Okay, we want to do this, but we've only got the budget for this. How can we do it? I've managed to progress beyond ketchup, but there's still, you have to think outside the box, and that kind of creativity. How can we make something look good on screen with only this kind of tiny resources that we've got? And that will hold you in good stead then. Um, and that's I think why they kind of, for a while there was that trend of taking low budget indie filmmakers who'd worked in horror and taking them onto the big projects. Peter Jackson with Lord of the Rings and Sam Raimi with Spider-Man. These were people, they knew they could do incredible things with a tiny amount of money. So give them a lot of money and see what they could do, and they did incredible things. Whereas I think some of the newer filmmakers today, kind of, maybe they haven't had that background, and maybe that's why some of the newer Marvel stuff costs a lot of money, but doesn't necessarily look like it cost a lot of money.
Yeah, and I feel like the more people I speak with, that horror always seems to be like that gateway for a lot of people, even people who I've even had conversations with uh people who were not necessarily involved in the genre that much, and it kind of became a natural progression of like, okay, let me go and make a horror movie to like get my foot in the door to like do something else. It's funny because like it's still kind of considered like the redheaded stepchild horrors, but then everybody kind of
Yeah,
uses it. The studios use it to make lots of money. The streamers use it to build up lots of streams. Filmmakers use it as like I guess an entry into somewhere else.
yeah. I mean, 100%. I mean, it's kind of the kind of dirty secret of Hollywood, really, and all film cultures is that horror is the one that kind of makes money, and that's the one that people want to watch. But you know, I mean, the Substance being nominated for Oscars is incredible because so rarely does anything get any kind of critical acclaim from somewhere like the Oscars. It's like something like the third horror movie ever to be nominated or something daft like that. Whereas, yeah, this is obviously it's a creative kind of training ground, really, where you can play and you can make mistakes and you can have fun um, before making more serious movies. Um, or some of us just love horror and just want to keep making horror movies.
Yeah, that's the part I'm like, yeah, I just can't. I couldn't see myself ever got into that situation, wanting to get back out of horror again.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody offers me a lot of money to make a rom com, then I'm happy to kind of give anything a go. But if you ask me what I want to do, I want to keep making horror movies. That's what I like, and that's what I enjoy doing.
When you made Ibiza Undead, what was that process like going from shorts to? I know you still said it's considered um low budget, but what's the jump there financially, and then I guess everything that comes with that, to take that step.
Um, I mean, yeah, there's a lot that comes with that, because even a low budget feature that still requires 50 odd people and money that's in the hundreds of thousands. Whereas, yeah, the shorts have been kind of pretty much self-funded. Get enough money to you know feed everybody for 2 days, really. Everybody's kind of doing it for the love of it. Whereas, yeah, this was a proper movie. Everybody got paid, not a lot, but we'd been paid, and obviously we shot in on location in Ibiza, so everybody had to be flown out there from the UK. We had to, accommodation, we had locations, special effects, and everything. So yeah, it was a jump from the shorts, and obviously then with even small amounts of money comes conditions, and you've got to keep the money men happy. Because yeah, that wasn't my own money. So you had to kind of so I had to find a production company willing to put the money in, and then obviously that came with various conditions and demands, and working relationships that you have to work through um, to try and get your film made. So you kind of got that creative versus financial concern, which you don't have. Short, you have financial concerns in like literally how much money have I got in my bank? Can I afford to pay my rent this month if I buy a prop? But then when it's somebody else's money, they obviously come in with things they want to do, and the film's got to be finished and commercial and available to be sold at the end.
What was it like shooting on location over there? I can't help but feel the few times that I've seen it, I always get I don't know if you're familiar with the uh the game Dead Island, but I always kind of get that
Yes.
vibe where I'm like, this feels uh like an on-screen version of what I kind of pictured when I played that game for the first time.
I mean, I think maybe up around about the time we were filming or something, actually, because I'd written it before. Um, and then the game was kind of out. I think people were playing it maybe as the film was coming out. Um, but yeah, that was an adventure. One thing I'd not done was shot abroad before. Um, and we had a young cast and a young crew in Ibiza it was kind of like trying to make a film on a club 1830s holiday. I was trying to hold it all together, whereas yeah, some people were partying and enjoying themselves on Ibiza, and like, oh, maybe we'll do a bit of filming here. So it was chaos, I think. Which I think is not necessarily a bad thing for that kind of movie. We wanted to capture that spirit. And lots of people who've been to Ibiza were like, "Oh, zombies in Ibiza. Everyone's like a zombie anyway," which is the kind of the vibe we wanted to get. Kind of, can you tell the clubbers from the zombies, really? Um, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. If you can't have fun making a zombie film in Ibiza, then you're in the wrong the wrong job. But it was, yeah, I'm not going to pretend it was all easy and all smooth, um, because one other thing is, you're kind of miles from home and from knowing where to get things. Oh my god, we need this. If I was in London, I'd be like, oh well, we just go there. Whereas Ibiza didn't really have any filming infrastructure at all. If the camera had broken down, the nearest replacement was in Barcelona, so there was no kind of kit or anything on the island. So everything had to be brought out. Um, and because Ibiza is it's a party island and kind of not much else really. So if you're not there to party, if you're there to work, it gets quite tricky. We'd turn up at a bar, for example, and we'd be like, "Oh, we're scheduled to be in here at 9 a.m. and Pedro said he'd let us in," and they'd be like, "Oh, Pedro, he doesn't get out of bed till 5 in the evening," and you'd be stuck waiting
Yeah.
outside a bar with all this camera crew, just kind of working on Spanish time, really, and everybody would go for siestas and everything would shut down. And, but yeah, fun, but yeah, tricky.
Did that make it, I don't know, I'm just fascinated by that to go from, like you said, you hadn't shot abroad and things like that. So you, uh, you get this budget, everybody has to fly to Ibiza, you're shooting on location, there's all these problems, everything all seems to pile on all at once. Was it hard to kind of, I don't know, like, obviously this is what you wanted, but then at the same time, it's like, wow, now I'm like in another country with all these problems and issues and 50 people to try and keep control of on a massive party island while I need to, and you've got these guys in the
Yeah.
background that put up the money and they're like, well, don't fuck up our money. We need to make this right. And was there any like, I don't know, alone moments where you're like, oh shit, what have I gotten myself into?
I think there probably were a couple, but they were very brief. Basically, just because I didn't have time to kind of have a proper "oh my god, what have I done" moment. Because we were all staying in villas, so we were staying with each other. So there was kind of no escape really. I kind of walked out of my room, then there was half the cast or half the crew kind of sat around, um, when we were back at the villa. And you're shooting long days, so you kind of you finish your shoot, you eat some food, you go to bed. Well, I went to bed. Other people went out, but I went to bed, and I'd wake up at 6 in the morning, and it'd be time to get back on set. So there wasn't really enough downtime to kind of. Oh, sorry, somebody's trying to call me.
Yeah, that's
So yeah, there wasn't enough downtime to really kind of worry about it too much, which is a good thing, really, because you just have to just kind of push on through. And I think if anybody is making the leaps from shorts to features, I think the only thing that I will, kind of bit of advice or kind of bit of knowledge that I can share is it becomes an endurance game. Whereas, if you're doing a short and it's 2 days, you can just run on adrenaline for those 2 days. You can be like, right, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. I don't need to sleep.
yeah.
Whereas if you're there 3 weeks, you need to pace yourself. You need to make sure you're eating, make sure you're sleeping, make sure you're drinking fluids. All of those kind of just general healthcare things, just to stop yourself kind of having a breakdown or anything, because it's a marathon, not a sprint on a feature. You have to, day 8, get up with the same energy and focus and be like, right, we're going to do this. Um, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I absolutely love it. And you'd only do it if you love it. But yeah, just be if you're making that jump, just be prepared to be like, yeah, okay, this is an endurance game.
So when you made that jump, do you feel like that was based solely off the back of the work and what you could create with essentially no budget? And is there a skill to also, sitting in a Zoom meeting or sitting in an office somewhere trying to convince somebody, okay, I need £500,000, I need £1 million, and I'm going to do this. Is that a skill that you
Oh,
need, or does the work have to speak for itself, or is it both? Like, how does that work?
I mean, it's both. I mean, it's entirely about networking. Um, and then you need something to back it up with. There are people who have brilliant work but can't network, and they don't get anything made, and there are people who brilliant at networking but have nothing to back it up with, and they maybe might make something, and then you'll all fall apart. So you kind of have to have
Yeah.
both. It is about making contacts, and because you never literally never know which conversation might lead to your film getting made. Um, if you go to a film festival and you hear the stories of how each film got made, there's not the same story. There's no, if you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, you will have a film at the end of it. It would be nice if there was, but there isn't. But the benefit of that is if you try those steps and it doesn't work, then you can try something completely different. Um, you know, Serendipity can happen at any time, and somebody might just suddenly go, "Oh, my uncle's got loads of money, looking to invest in a movie," and like, a random conversation with somebody at a bus stop can lead to a film getting made or finance getting put in. So yeah, just be open, and be prepared to kiss a lot of frogs as well. There's, you have to have a lot of conversations that lead nowhere, um, especially in the financial side of things. There's a lot of bullshit. There's a lot of
Yeah.
people who'll spin you along. Oh yeah, we've got the money. We've got the money, and they just like to play it, essentially being producers or being bigwigs. So you kind of have to deal with that really, and don't believe the money exists until it's sat in your account. Because there's plenty of horror stories I've heard of people who've started filming and the money's fallen through in some way. So um, yeah, it's tricky, but it is part of the process. You can't just sit there anymore and hope that somebody will find your genius. You have to go out there.
What was the reception like then, once everything is said and done and maybe you finished post on the movie and I don't know, you sit down with the the production company or whoever. What was the reception like then? Was there, I don't know, any talks of sequels? Did they just want more of the same? How did you find like the aftermath of that whole thing?
It was quite the post process took quite a long time, and there were reshoots that the production company wanted. Um, and as far as I know, the film's done pretty well, sold around the world and everything. Um, I did have ideas for a sequel at one time, but I've kind of moved on now. Really, once you've kind of done zombies, I was like, I'm kind of done with zombies. Um, yeah, no, it was fun. It was fun, and it was for my first learning experience was a real baptism of fire, really. Um, Shooting in Ibiza and with all those extras and everything, I did the things that you're told not to do when you write your first feature.
Mm.
You're kind of told to use locations which you have, like your flat. You're told to keep the cast small. We had club scenes, with extras and everything. So I kind of ignored everything. Um, and I believe in pushing myself really, and kind of, but also kind of showing the audience some fun stuff. If they turn in for a low budget zombie film and it's three people sat in a house, you're kind of just showing them what you think they think they're going to see. If they watch a low budget zombie film and suddenly you've got a beach and a boat, as we had, and a nightclub, suddenly, it's more interesting for the audience, I think, and hopefully they're going to get more out of it.
Is it more difficult the second time out? So like the movie comes out and like you said, it does well, it's sold
Mm.
around the world and everybody's relatively happy with the final product. Is it difficult then from that point to move on again? I feel like, I always ask people about, oh, the switch from making shorts or maybe helping on other movies to your own feature. And then I kind of gloss over the fact that, like, yeah, well, it isn't just a guarantee that if you make one and people are happy that you just instantly have access to just constant work.
I
Um,
mean, 100%. I mean, there's a horrible stat. Something like 80% of filmmakers only ever make one feature. I don't know the exact number, but it's something. It's 80, 90%. It's some
which is
ridiculous number.
crazy statistic.
Um, and I think what it is various reasons, but people obviously pour their kind of heart and soul into that first feature, and then maybe if it doesn't do well financially or critically, it needs to do at least one of those. Then it's kind of just as hard, if not harder, to get the second one off the ground. Um, but I think there's also a kind of expectation, which I had as well, which is you've done your kind of you feel like you've done your stint in the indie coal mines and you've worked your hands to the bone and you've made your feature for whether it's 50 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand, whatever. And you put your heart and soul into that and you've made that. And then you're like, well, somebody's going to give me feature number two. I need to go up. And so you're looking for 1 or 2 million. And that becomes a very different conversation and a very difficult ask. And I think a lot of people get stung by that. They assume their second feature will automatically be, 10 times the budget of their first. Whereas there's no logical reason for that to actually happen. And I know so many people who got stuck, who've been stuck in that process. Because you're kind of essentially unless you own the production company and all that budget came back to you from the first one, you're starting from scratch again and trying to raise for the second one. And now you're trying to raise 10 times as much. So it's going to be 10 times as hard. There is no linear career progression that just goes straight up. Even your bigger directors, they'll take this film, then they'll take that film, they take this film. They're not increasing their budgets each time. So I think that's something that I would warn first-time filmmakers about. Is there is no automatic. Congratulations, you've made your first feature. You're in the club. Now we give you real money. That doesn't happen. What might happen is people go, well, you did brilliant on 100 grand. Here's another 100 grand. Do
Yeah.
that again. So yeah, don't necessarily. There obviously are the big examples that we can think of. People who did go up. People, Gareth Edwards who did Monsters, went on to do Godzilla. But these are exceptions. That's not the rule. Even a successful indie film, you can probably then get another successful indie film made, but you can't. Nobody's going to automatically go, "Oh, well done, mate! Congratulations!
Yeah.
You're automatically onto the next level."
Since then, you've kind of, I guess, I don't want to call it diversified, but you've kind of within horror thriller aspects, you've kind of done different subgenres. Do you think that's something that's key as well, that people don't, um, you make a good zombie movie, and then it's like, oh, you make another good zombie movie, and then make another one, and then make another one, and then it just becomes like, if you ever wanted to try and get a different project made, people are like, yeah, but aren't you the zombie guy? Like, just do zombies.
Yeah, I mean, you can get very kind of stereotyped, I think. But for me, it's been mainly not really thinking as a kind of long-term career thing. It's been more thinking what's going to interest me, what's going to excite me. Whereas, yeah, doing more zombies after doing all the zombies before wasn't what I was kind of excited about. I'd kind of not used up all my zombie ideas, but I'd put everything that I could into that. So I wasn't like, oh god, let's do another one. I was like, okay, let's see what other genres we can do. All within horror and thriller. That's the kind of where my heart lies, really. But yeah, I like all kinds of aspects of that. I like thrillers and art house stuff. I like horror comedies. So yeah, just entertaining myself, really.
How often do you look at, that uh, creation process through, a fan perspective or an audience perspective, versus, professionally, in the sense of, I suppose what does your process look like when you start to create an idea? Is it are you somebody that carries a notebook? Do you, take walks? I've heard of people, they'll literally go to a city and just wander in the city and people watch and try and get inspiration. And I've also heard filmmakers say never follow a trend because by the time you're finished that project, that trend will be just so stale that it's not relevant anymore.
Yeah, I mean, with the following the trends thing, even with the best will in the world, you'll kind of process from creating a movie through to it being released is maybe a year and a half if absolutely you smash everything out. So yeah, following trends is difficult. So you just have, and you're gonna if your movie making is your writing, directing, producing, you're across the life of this thing. If you're acting in something or DOP on something, you're turning up for 2 weeks, and then you can forget about it if you want. But if you're a director on something, you're living with it. You're living with the pre-production. You're living with production. You're sitting with it in post. When on the wrap day of a movie, all your cast and crew will be talking about what they're going on to next, and they'll go, "Oh, what are you doing next?" And you go, "Well, 6 months of this still. We've got to do the sound mix. We've got to do the VFX." Um, so make sure that your idea is something that you love really, and that you can follow through and spend a lot of time of your life with it. So if you're just kind of chasing a trend, then you might end up finding yourself hating it. And as for kind of ideas, yeah, they just kind of pop up every now and again. I've got notebooks. I put them on my phone because they will, for me, they don't come at the, oh, I'm going to sit down and think of ideas time. They come, I'm in the shower, I'm on the bus. So always be kind of like, or, you're trying to get to sleep is the worst. And you're like, oh, I'm trying to get to sleep. Oh, that would be good. And you kind of debate with yourself, will I remember this in the morning? Or should I write it down? Always write it down. Because otherwise you'll wake up and you go, I had a brilliant idea just before I went to sleep. What was it? No.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely I can guarantee so many people can relate to that.
Yeah, so always write it down if you can. And try and write down as much detail as you can, because for a while I just would write down keywords, and then you'd look at your phone 2 days later and you'd go, cheese nightmare planet, and you'd go, what did that mean? That obviously meant something big to me at the time. So try and put some explanation to help your future self go, actually that was that. And a lot of the ideas won't ever get used. um, but what I personally find quite useful is trying to combine ideas.
Mm.
um, so Punch, um, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that was a film that came about from combining two ideas. I wanted to do a film set in a seaside town in winter because I really like that kind of melancholy vibe, and I wanted to make a British slasher movie. But those were two separate ideas for quite a long time, and then it's only when they came together that Punch came about. So if you've got a whole bunch of ideas written down, try combining them, and suddenly you might have something quite interesting then.
Is it a conscious decision for you to direct the movies you write? And if so, why is that? Is it just, I guess, getting to see your vision the entire way through?
I mean, I like writing and I like directing, so that's a way of a way of doing it. But I've written stuff for other people to direct, and I've directed stuff that other people have written. Um, I quite like doing all of it really, because writing and directing, and I've been producing as well recently. You know, that very much is, you're in control of this project, but it does obviously it takes a lot out of you, and takes a long time. Whereas sometimes it's quite nice to be able to write something, and then it's somebody else's problem how they get it put together. Or I did a director of hire job a couple of years back, and that was quite nice. That the money had been found, the script had been written, the cast had been found. My job was just to come on and be on set and work with the actors. Um, so I like doing the for hire jobs because it's just a bit easier, really, and you can still have the fun without so much of the stress. But then sometimes you're writing an idea and you're like, well, I know how this should look. I'm
Mm.
not going to pass this on to someone else. I'm not going to try and sell the script. I'm going to try and make this because I know how it should be done.
You mentioned Punch, and it's something that I want to get into now. I'm not sure. Obviously, maybe people further afield outside of the UK and Ireland mightn't be overly familiar with maybe the concept behind this. If you could give it in, I guess, layman's terms for people, what exactly is the concept behind the film?
So yeah, it's a slasher movie set in a seaside town in winter, and the villain is an evil Mr. Punch from Punch and Judy, the puppet show. Um, and he's a he's a very strange character in real life. He was originally Italian. Um, it's like an Italian form of street theatre. Came over to like the UK, like the 15th century, I think, and became huge. And it was originally for adults. And adults would go and watch these puppet shows, and there'd be like satire about the politicians and royalty of the day. And then it kind of morphed into being this children's entertainment, which people watched at the seaside.
Still
Um,
quite creepy, to be fair.
and creepy, yeah. I mean, essentially, it's about a guy who beats his wife, who beats his child, and gets eaten by a crocodile. There's a lot of death and violence in this.
Now, the
So it
next question.
didn't take much to turn it into a horror movie, basically.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Where, like, are you just sitting somewhere someday having coffee and you're like, huh, Punch and Judy was quite unsettling and scary. I wonder if I turned him into a villain. Like, how did that process? Now, when I see the final product, I'm like, of course, why wouldn't you make him into
Yeah.
a horror villain? But I guess previous to that, it's kind of like I'm like, yeah, but if it seems like, of course, why hadn't someone else thought of this, or where did that?
Well, I thought that was exactly my thought process, and so yeah, it came about, as I said earlier, from having two separate ideas. I wanted to do a film set in a British seaside. I always like that vibe. I'm from Birmingham, which is as far as possible from the seaside in the UK. So I was always excited when I'd see the sea. So even if I was there for whatever reason in February and it was raining and cold and horrible, I'd still be like, "Oh wow!" And I still get that now. Um, and then I wanted to create a slasher movie that could end up being a franchise. So I knew it needed a character, a big character, but I wanted to do something with an American style story, which was teenagers being killed on a night out. But I wanted to make like a British serial killer, and I had terrible ideas, like maybe he'd wear a Union Jack outfit, or a bowler hat, or just awful ideas. And then it wasn't as soon as I went, oh, maybe my British serial slasher killer could be at the seaside. I went, well, it's got to be Mr. Punch. And then I thought, oh God, somebody's done that. Somebody must have done that. And there's been kind of Mr. Punch has popped up in a few horror movies. There's one where he's a little killer puppet in an anthology from the 70s, I think. But nobody had ever done him as a masked killer before. So I was like, right, let's make this as quickly as we can before somebody else thinks of it. Really.
Now, how does that conversation go when you sit down with other members of your team or like creative partners and go, right, okay, here's the idea. Uh, what was I guess, the reception? I can't help but feel like if you were in any way a fan of horror, instantly be like, oh, of course, we're gonna make this.
Yeah, I mean, Punch was actually produced via my production company. Um, so give audience a little bit of background. So it was in the pandemic that I had a bunch of other projects I was working on, and like everybody's, it all fell apart because nothing was being shot. Um, and I didn't have any work, didn't have any money, just sat at home looking after my kid who was 3 at the time. So that gave me some spare time, and I kind of came up with the idea of why don't I set up my own production company, so I can start kind of teaching myself really the film finance side. So with Ibiza Undead, for example, I written and directed it, but I was not involved in the financing or in the distribution. And people would ask me questions about the distribution of it, and I'd be like, I've got no idea.
Yeah,
I don't know how any of that works. So I was like, well, if I can kind of teach myself from a low budget perspective, then I can start to be in a bit more control of what gets made. So rather than going to other people and going, I've got an idea, will you give me any money, please? If I could work out how to raise finance, then I'll be in a bit more control about what gets made. So Punch was via that production company. Um, so I could, I essentially greenlit it myself, but obviously had to get other people involved. And so I worked with my co-producer on that, a girl called Becky, Rebecca Matthews. She's worked with the guys who did the Winnie the Pooh movies. She's like super experienced producer. She's only like 30, but she's made like maybe 70 movies. Um,
okay.
super experienced, and a brilliant person to have on set. And I was like, okay, Becky, come on, you can help me co-produce. We're doing a Mr. Punch horror movie, and the kind of first step was really it was designing the character, because that a slasher movie kind of lives or dies by its slasher, by its mask, by the villain. Um, so it was actually a company in Ireland called Rubber Johnnies.
Yes.
Uh, I don't know if you know those guys. So they make rubber latex masks and props and stuff. And so they made the Mr. Punch. So I did some drawings and sent them in, and they made me a bespoke Mr. Punch mask. And I remember the day I got it back, got it in the post, because I'd seen pictures of it. They'd been sending me kind of pictures as they'd been working on it, but it wasn't until I got it in the post and I kind of put it on, looked in the mirror, scared my wife with it. I was like, okay, it works. Because if this hadn't been scary or looked silly in any way, I mean, it just obviously looks a bit silly. It's Mr. Punch, but it's sinister as well at the same time. In the way that Mr. Punch is, he has this squeaky voice and this huge nose and everything. So he should be funny, but he's also
Yeah.
creepy. And the mask kind of captured that, and I was like, yeah, we're going to be all right here.
Do you still have the mask?
I do. It's in my cupboard over there.
I I feel like horror collectors, people always ask me, to ask filmmakers, do you have props from your own movies? Do you ever keep something from production? I feel like that one is like, I'm assuming it's a one of one, so it's probably like,
No, we had 3 copies made, um, in case any got damaged or anything. Um, and it is our bespoke mask, so we're looking to do Punch 2 at some point soon. So the mask will be back. So I'll probably get some more copies from Rubber Johnnies. Um, I've got one, and I think the stunt guys have got the others, because some of them got a bit damaged in various kind of
yeah,
activity. But no, we had 3 of those made up. But I haven't got too much from films. I would have kept lots more, but I live in a small flat in London with my wife and child who don't necessarily want bloody props hanging around. And the thing is, with latex, it rots. So I've had like arms and heads and stuff from films, and I'd love to kind of keep it, but it does sort of rot, especially if it's
yeah.
got all that fake syrupy blood on it. After a year, you're like, I've got to throw that away.
So people can expect, because I always feel like, and I don't know if it's maybe just a complete misconception, but I always feel like if you can create a cool, interesting slasher villain, that it nearly instant.
Out for a second.
Are we
Oh,
back?
yes, you're back now. Yes, sorry. Yeah, you cut out halfway through that question. Sorry.
Apologies. Is that an internet issue? Let me check. Oh, there we go. I think we're back.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I always feel like with, if you can come up with a cool, interesting, unique slasher villain, it nearly instantly makes the community go, okay, well, this is like a franchise now. We're definitely like, I have to have more. I have to have sequels. I have to have prequels. Was that something that you considered at the time? You just mentioned Punch 2 now. Was that something that you had planned at the time, or was it dependent on the reception and how it was kind of
I mean, it was kind of baked in from the start that I wanted to. Obviously, if kind of nobody was interested in the film and I couldn't sell it, then that goes on the back burner. Um, but yeah, it was definitely something I wanted to do. That was part of the idea, was create a character, because um, that's what keeps people going back for the sequels. There's some brilliant slasher movies that have only ever had one, because the movie might be great, but nobody remembers who the guy or sometimes woman in the mask was. The ones that have kept going are the ones where you can instantly picture the bad guy. And so that was why it was kind of so important to do that with Mr. Punch. Mr. Punch, he's got a look. He's got a look. He's got a recognizable look. And yeah, I Punch Two's nearly been finished being written, so ideally I'd like to get that shot this year. And then I've got ideas for prequels, sequels, Punch in Space. The ideas are all there. We just need to kind of find the money to get them made.
Yeah, I feel like people eat that stuff up as well. Do you enjoy that? Obviously, I'm sure you're a fan as well, but as as a professional and someone whose career is based in, for the most part, the horror genre, is that something that you, I guess, appreciate about the audience? I feel like we're quite diehard and like there's a very cult,
Yeah.
movies can pick up a cult following really quickly and like the fans will get behind it. They want their version of the mask, they want a figure, they want t-shirts, they want this, they want that, and they kind of keep it going.
Oh, I mean, 100%. I mean, that's the kind of reason that indie horror filmmakers exist. Really, is because there is an audience for indie horror films. Um, where in the way that there isn't for indie rom coms or you know many other genres. Um, Horror fans are almost kind of, I think, budget agnostic. I think in a way, sometimes even when you see like there's some big glossy Hollywood thing coming out, it almost counts against a movie for kind of
Yeah.
hardcore Hollywood fans, horror fans, because yeah, we want to see the edges, we want to see the joins, we want to see real blood and real guts. Um, which we know that maybe with a Hollywood thing we won't. We'll have the edges taken off, both in terms of filmmaking quality, but in terms of kind of darkness of the story. Whereas if you're watching, an indie horror movie, literally anything goes. They filmmakers could just suddenly pull something out completely out of the bag on you, and you'd be like, oh, wow. So that's kind of what I love about horror film. Horror fans, they're very vocal as well. So if they don't like what you've done, they will tell you. I have
Yeah.
letterbox reviews, the worst thing ever. But I think the one thing that a horror fan won't ever do is criticize you on your budget.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once
Yeah.
it gets out to the wider world and your film's on Tubi, and the non horror fans start watching it, then you will start to get some things going. Oh, this budget was only $2, blah blah blah. But if you go, I go to Frightfest every year. Try to go to other horror festivals around the country. People will talk about the film and what they liked and what they didn't, but nobody will ever go, "Oh, well, yeah, that budget was the shit." People will take your film at face value for whatever you had to spend on it and judge it on that, which is something that I obviously really appreciate.
Yeah,
working on low budgets.
yeah, it's strange sometimes when I look at the more mainstream, creators and influencers or whatever you wanna call them, and, they come across movies, particularly from the horror genre more than anything, and it seemed to have maybe we're changing a bit again now, but at one stage there, it seemed to become like the cool clickbaity thing to, like, pick a movie and probably not even watch it, just, like, mirror the opinions of, like, other mainstream creators and be like, "Well, it's garbage, and it's this, and it's that, and it's laughable." There's a constant just, like
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that kind of "oh, so bad it's good" kind of sneering at movies that don't have a lot of money and maybe the effects are obvious. Whereas I think, yeah, if you're a horror fan, you'd much rather a real prosthetic arm coming off, even if you can tell it's fake, than a Hollywood movie where it's CG or they cut away from it. You know, you want to see that arm coming off, even if it's the actor's clearly got it hidden behind him and whatever.
would you be open to and it leads into something I don't know how much or how little we can talk about it in a second, but, do you ever sit down and maybe look at existing IPs or, you know, franchises or names and either have you ever, I don't know, written like your take on another character or something maybe you'd like to bring back that you feel you mentioned before there's a lot of slasher movies, a lot of movies that came out maybe in the 80s and stuff that only ever got one shot and maybe you could reimagine them in modern day or do your take.
I mean, I've never written anything because I'm very much kind of I'm writing to get something made. Rather because if you write something based on an IP you don't own, you can't make it. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's obviously there's films that I'm like, oh, I'd love to get a hold of that. And you see, obviously so many things are being rebooted now and being redone. And um, I mean, I think the one thing that I would really, really love to get into, Hellraiser.
Mm,
I just think that the first movie, or even the first two, maybe even three, maybe even four, if we're being very generous, have got so many ideas because so many slashers, it's a guy in a mask. You're kind of relatively limited in what you can do. But Hellraiser, these are things from like another dimension. They can do anything, and the films just kind of got smaller and less ambitious over time.
yeah.
Whereas I don't know. I mean, they the sort of modern one was okay, but I just think there's so much you could do in that world, um, with what Clive Barker's done, kind of invented. That yeah, in an ideal world, if someone said, "What do you want to do?" I would say I do want to do a new Hellraiser movie, proper
It
scary, proper just nuts.
it definitely feels like a missed opportunity with that world, like, like you
Yeah,
just mentioned, it could be so vast and so open, but yes,
yeah,
now that you mentioned that, like, look, I love even a lot of the sequels for what they are, and maybe it's that horror fan thing you talked about where I can allow certain things that maybe other genres or other
yeah.
communities wouldn't allow. But yeah, you're definitely right about that, that they as it went on, it got smaller and smaller, and, like, towards the end, it nearly felt like we were just shooting in, like, a single room.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's financial reasons for that, and the latter ones were made just to keep the rights, and nobody cared about it and everything. But yeah, if you think of what they had in the second one, they were in another dimension with this maze and the Leviathan and all of this. There's a whole mythology out there that you kind of saw, and I watched those as like a teenager. I was like, oh my god, this is almost like religious experience where we're going with
Yeah.
this, and then yeah, it just got smaller and smaller.
Yeah, it
So yeah,
was like they used Pinhead, they just give him, a handful of really cool, clippable quotes, and that would be used for all of the promotion, and then that'd be it.
yeah, and then he wouldn't be in it at all. And oh yeah,
Yeah, it's
so
unfortunate.
that's something that there's my pitch to the universe.
Uh,
Um, and yeah, The new one was fine, wasn't it? But again, not enough Cenobite action for
Yeah,
me. You
which
know,
is
there was
what everybody wants.
lots of faff about other stuff, and you're like, I just want to see these guys, see the Cenobites.
Speaking of that then, and like I said, you can kind of direct this, as little or as much as you can or are willing to talk about. Rumpelstiltskin, how did that come across your mind? Or, like, where did that come from?
Um, so that was kind of coming from, partly, because this was again via my production company, so it's trying to think of something that would sell. Um, so you're kind of looking at, what people are interested in now, and obviously those fairy tale horrors are big. But I also knew I didn't want to just do a slasher movie based on a fairy tale character. I'd done Mr. Punch. He's not a fairy tale, but he's still an IP slasher, and I knew, I wanted to do Punch too, so I still wanted to carry him going. Um, and I know the Winnie the Pooh guys as well. It's a small industry over here, so we all kind of know each other and have lots of the same crew working on our productions and stuff. So I didn't want to copy what they were doing as well. And just what they've done so well is take cute characters and make them evil and turn them into slashers. So I was trying to think: is there a a fairy tale or Disney character that is evil already, and then we could kind of just up the evil. Um, and I've talked about it earlier. I've got a son, so when he was about 2 or 3, I would read those books of fairy tales. And some of them you're like, I don't have to skip this one because it's quite dark. And Rumpelstiltskin's one of them. He tries to steal a baby, and then he doesn't get the baby, and he kills himself. And the end. Um, so you're kind of thinking, is this right to read to a 2 or 3-year-old? Obviously, I'm a horror filmmaker, so I did. I think kids need to be scared as much as possible at a young age. Um, so yeah, that once I kind of thought about that character, and then again, like with Mr. Punch, I had to check that he hadn't been done by somebody recently. Um, and the most recent, there's a film in the mid-90s,
Yeah,
Rumpelstiltskin,
yeah,
and he drives a motorbike. He's in present day LA, so very different.
yeah. For people who
Um,
don't know, that was I want to say it was directed by Mark Jones, who is famous for like the Leprechaun franchise and
yeah,
stuff. I
it's
actually had
very
him
much
on the
very
show.
in the leprechaun world. Yeah,
Because even when we talked to him on the show, he basically said that he was like, we just what ended up happening was I don't know if it was Trimark or somebody said, well, we kind of want Leprechaun again, but not Leprechaun. So is there anything like we could find? And then that was like the next thing to be like, oh,
yeah,
just get him, just put him into that.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
He's essentially just a leprechaun, but
yeah, yeah, pretty much.
um, but very different. And so I kind of thought, okay, I want to do um, Rumpelstiltskin. How are we going to do him? What we're going to do? Um, and I was, I'm a big fan of Robert Eggers with The Witch, and that kind of thing. And I was like, okay, well, that's how would Robert Eggers do Rumpelstiltskin essentially, and that was the kind of the thing that got me into it. Producer brain, tell character, and then creative brain goes, oh, but how can I make it creative? And went, oh, you like those kind of movies? Try and make a movie like that looks like something like that. Obviously, I don't have not comparing myself to Robert Eggers at all in terms of talent, and I don't have anything in terms of his budget. But that was the kind of influence. Could we do something that's genuinely period? So it's not a fairy tale character killing modern day teenagers. I wanted to do something that's kind of muddy and medieval and grim, and harks back to the original story really. Um, because the Brothers Grimm stories, to a large extent, they're folk horror.
Mm,
Uh, you know, they're whilst some of the things like Winnie the Pooh and stuff are taking a character who's cute and making it evil. If you're going back to the Brothers Grimm stories, you're de-Disneyfying those and you're going back to what they were originally. If you're making a horror movie of a Brothers Grimm story, they are horror movies.
Does that make it, logistically more difficult in the sense of, from an outside perspective, would it have been just easier for you to be like, "Okay, let's do Rumpelstiltskin, but let's just do it in, like, 2024," and just,
Oh,
like, that would be easier than having to go back, because
oh,
obviously
a
you've got
million times, a
yeah,
million times easier. Um, and yeah, shooting a period thing, on a micro budget is is madness, really. Um, and it's the kind of thing that if somebody told me they were going to do it, I'd be like, "You're an idiot." But when it's your own idea, you're like, "Oh, I think I can do it. I think I can do it. I think I can squeeze this out." And me and Becky had done. We She'd been producer for hire, and I'd been director for hire on a film called Cinderella's Revenge, which we'd shot the year previously. Um, and that was my kind of first taste at period. Um, and I loved it, actually. It's hard, but when you're on a set and people are coming past in ball gowns and everybody's dressed up and everything, and on Rumpelstiltskin where people are coming past on horses and in armor, you're like, "Oh, this is a real film we're making here." And you can
yeah,
kind of see the magic of film happening before your eyes. Whereas if you're doing contemporary and you're in your hoodie and your cast are in hoodies and you're filming in an Airbnb, it's fun, but you could be doing anything. Whereas, yeah, if somebody's coming past, you've got three horses and knights coming past you, then you're like, oh, yeah, you're living out your proper, Ridley Scott fantasies here of making a real movie. So I knew that from Cinderella. I knew it was going to be hard, but I knew it was possible if you're kind of clever with your locations and your costumes. Um, and so yeah, it proved it was hard. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna lie to everyone and say go and make a period drama on no money. It's easy. It's really hard. You can't just go to Primark and buy a costume. You can't just guerrilla shoot in the streets or go to your mate's house to shoot something. All your costumes, all your locations, all your props, you have to think about and you have to hire or you have to make. So yeah, it's tricky.
yeah, instantly I'm like, God, that's gotta be difficult to pull that off. When can people expect to see that? And I guess what's your like, I don't know how involved you are with like release plan and distribution and things like that.
Well, so this is one that I've produced myself by my company, so I have been across that. So we are premiering at Frightfest Glasgow at the start of March, and then it's going to be hitting streaming pretty soon after that, sometime in April, hopefully. Um, so
Any
yes, so,
particular streamer, or is that gonna
uh,
be you're gonna have to wait?
I don't know the details yet, but it will be generally the release of these kind of movies. So it's not going to be exclusive with anyone. It tends to be your first window is it goes to the pay-per-view. So you're on Amazon where you have to pay for it, iTunes you have to pay for it. That tends to be the first window, and your second window will be an exclusive streaming deal. So maybe Shudder or Netflix or something like that. And then it will go to your AVOD streamers, which is your Amazon Primes, your Tubies, your YouTube potentially. So that tends to be the life cycle of a straight to streaming movie, which is the equivalent of straight to video these days.
I
So
I have
that'll be what it will do.
I have a couple of quick fire questions before I let you go, but just on the topic of streaming and things like that, for you as a I suppose from a fan perspective and then also a professional perspective, how do you feel about how many different streamers and how many different opportunities there is? Because yeah, I kind of I flip flop on my opinion of it because as an audience member, sometimes I remember having to rent videos and you were committed to that movie or
Yeah,
however many tapes, and that was it. And now it's like I have everything at my fingertips and I never really know what to I have this ever growing list of recommendations and things I want to watch. and never seem to get through any of them. But then for you in a professional aspect, um, is that always a good thing? Because I've heard horror stories of people, their movie, they're super excited, and maybe they get filled full of shit by somebody about, oh yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and then the next thing, it gets dumped on some streamer with 50 other movies, and nobody sees it. Now, the beautiful thing about that is, I think social media and the internet, especially within the horror community, it might take 4 or 5 years, but then somebody finds it, and all of a sudden, it's like the new movie that everyone's discovered that came out 6 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with everything you said there. It is very much a double-edged sword. Um, there's more places than ever you can put your movie now, and they're all looking for content. And indie movies are fine. Whereas before, you had very much had gatekeepers. Your movie went theatrical, and then it went to DVD. And if nobody thought it was good enough for those, then it might never get released. Now your movie will definitely get released, even if you have to self-release via Film Hub or something. But then, obviously, on the downside of that is, the amount of money you get paid for stream versus what you'd have got from a cinema ticket or a DVD. It's tiny. You're talking fractions of a cent rather than you'd get half the cinema ticket if it used to go to cinema. So there's good and there's bad from a producer's perspective. Somebody will always be able to watch my movie, and people will say now, where can I watch your movie? I can generally point them to like 6 different places. Whereas previously you might have had to go, oh, it's on DVD, but the DVD is discontinued, so it's gone there. But yeah, financially, the money comes in dribs and drabs now, rather than one big lump. And then as a fan, I'm the same as you. I grew up, hiring VHS. Then I moved on to buying DVDs and Blu-rays, and now, yeah, I'm the same. Like, I have all of these streamers and too much to watch. But obviously, you can watch a wide range of stuff. So much stuff is available. You don't have to wait, to find the special edition import DVD of something. But I think also, if there is no physical release, then once it's gone now off streaming, which I think is the worrying thing. Because back when everything was on physical, you knew it existed somewhere. Even if the release had been discontinued, if you really wanted to watch it, you could go on eBay and you could find the import DVD or something. But now, if all your streaming services have taken it off, the film's effectively vanished. Which is kind of worrying. It's made films more disposable.
Yeah.
And I think also the viewing habits as well. And this is something I was talking to a few first-time directors, and they were talking about how they'd had some not so great reviews on Letterboxd. And I was like, the bad news is they're going to get worse because the film goes through the process of, as I was describing, where people will see it at a festival and you will get a very engaged audience. Whether they like it or not, they will have engaged and given you an informed opinion on that film. Then you've got people who bought it. Then you've got people who've kind of sat down on the streaming, but then by the time it gets to Tubi, it's background noise. And bizarrely, you'd think if people weren't paying for it, you'd get better reviews because they hadn't.
It's like the opposite.
But it is the opposite. People were like, "Oh, I paid nothing for this. It's a piece of shit." So because people are just engaged with it less, I think, and it's been on, and they've been on their phone at the same time, and that was rubbish. That made no sense. Well, you weren't watching it. So and it's the same things happen with music via things like Spotify. Kind of recorded music is now very much a background thing,
Yeah.
and I think once your movie hits those kind of AVOD streamers, it can often become a background thing, which is why things like festivals are so great, because you can get before it moves to that audience, you can at least super serve your dedicated horror fan audience and
Yeah, I
kind of
think
get it in
I
front of their eyeballs.
get I suppose a real gauge on, you know, how it's actually performing and how an actual audience are receiving it, because I've definitely dealt with this at a way lower level again, but like times I've had crossover guests who aren't filmmakers or writers or something like that, and I will have, you know, had someone on or interviewed somebody. I interviewed a real life exorcist at one point, Father Vincent Lampert, who's like really, I guess, internet famous now. He does all these big podcasts and whatever. And like over the course of a few weeks, I think fans of his or like his audience came across. And I just started to get all these, like, obviously people who weren't interested in anything else other than just being brought over by
Yeah,
him, and I was getting a lot of, like, you know, "Oh, you're terrible at asking questions, you don't know anything about religion, you don't," and I was like, "I never actually claimed to," like,
yeah,
it's we clarified at the start, like, it's a horror-based channel, and I'm interviewing a real life exorcist, that's the kind of thing, but this went on and on and on, it was like what you said, it's like it's that thing about, like, showing your movie at a festival to people who want to see a movie, who want to
mm,
enjoy a movie regardless of, "Oh, well, I didn't really like this," or, "I thought that could have been better, but I like this, and I like that, and I
yeah,
appreciate this." Versus, like you said, when you get down and down and down, it just becomes like, "Oh, it's just shit." It's like,
yeah,
"Well, why is it shit?" And it's like, "I don't know, but it's just shit, and that's it."
yeah. Just yeah, don't yeah. So ignore the reviews. I think because once it hits 2B, you know,
Yeah.
it's it's worth saying. Watching your film with an audience and seeing what people say about it afterwards, if they're a kind of dedicated audience, that can be very valuable. Because you can sit there and you may have edited your film and know it inside out, but when you sit there with an audience, you can feel you'll be able to feel the dead bits where you're losing them, and you'll go, "Oh God, no, I should have cut that." And then, but then equally there's bits where things land, and if you're doing a horror movie, there's probably scares. There might well be jokes, and if a joke lands or a scare lands suddenly, and you're watching it with 300 people, that is such a rewarding experience. You can be just like, "Oh my God, my soul has returned to my body." That joke landed. That scare got a couple of people jumping. My job has been done. I have fulfilled the brief.
Do you have any comfort horror movies? Like movies that you would find yourself, I don't know, revisiting over time, or just ones that stick out, not necessarily, you know, your top movies ever or anything, but just ones that maybe you've watched more often than others?
Um, yeah, definitely. What have I watched? Um, and I think things can kind of change. So, for example, I'd say Nightmare on Elm Street is one of my comfort horror movies, but wouldn't have started like that.
Mm,
And the same with maybe even The Shining. I watched those first time, I don't know, 12, 13, and they scared me shitless. And now I've watched them 20 times, and now I enjoy them at an entirely different level. They don't scare
yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so I think they've evolved over time. And I think if you'd have told me my 13-year-old self watching The Shining for the first time that this will become a movie that you will watch maybe once a year, just for fun. Yeah, I'd have been like, "What?" I'm fucking terrified. Um, so yeah, just your relationships and kind of things change. Uh,
Mm.
but then you're always looking for something new to scare you, I think. Because what did scare you then has become quite comforting. So you're like, "Give me something new."
So to go into a back into the professional mind again, is there any subgenre that you would love to kind of play in that you haven't had a chance to, even if it's, you know, something that people considered overused, whether it be found footage or some of these other ones that people are like, oh well, I don't know, but is there one that you would love to, I guess, dip your toe in?
Um, I mean, there's a whole bunch, really. I mean, with my production company now, what I'm trying to do is expand it so it's not just me making the movies. I'm not just writing, directing everything. Um, don't want it to be it's not a vanity project. So I've got a whole bunch of scripts that were kind of developing with different writers, different directors. Um, and we made a film called Custom, which has also been doing the festival route and should hopefully be out soon. So that was with, so I just produced that via my company, and that was by a guy called Thiago Teixeira, Brazilian director who lives in London. And that's kind of art housey, David Lynch, Cronenbergy kind of horror. And that's, I kind of went with that because that's a genre that I love, but I don't necessarily feel I'm the most suited for doing it.
Mhm.
Um, you know, so that kind of scratched that itch. It's like I'd love to make a David Cronenberg-esque horror, but that's not kind of where my directing or writing kind of tends to sit. I put more jokes in mine, for example. So then this script, and this other director came to me, and I was like, yeah, this is the kind of film that I'd like to watch. You know, I'll help you produce it, and we'll
Yeah,
make it
yeah.
get out there. So that's kind of what I'm doing with my production company, really. Hopefully, so even genres that I like but don't necessarily feel I'm suited to, we can delve into that. I've never done a found footage, and I would like to, but only if I could. I think find the right idea, because I think too often it is obviously used as a kind of, well, we had no money. Um,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and it's not necessarily even cheaper. You still need all the actors, you need the effects. It's just an excuse to make it visually look shitter. And um, the best found footage are ones that understand the rules, I think. Um, and the worst ones are the ones that ignore the rules and just suddenly, oh, this person had a camera, why? And cheat. You need that kind of suspension of disbelief.
The, the amount of times behind the scenes that I've heard of, like, maybe, somebody comes up with an idea or a project or a film, and either the company or the financiers or somebody will say, "Yeah, well, yeah, we would make it, but we'll definitely make it if you can just change it to found footage, and then we can, like, save money and, like, just." And, like, you can definitely tell sometimes with projects where it's like, "I don't think this story was actually
Yeah,
supposed to be told as found footage, and now you've just put in," and like you said, where it's like, "Oh, yeah, this woman that's on this trip, for some reason, has her phone recording for the entirety of the
yeah,
situation,"
yeah.
you
And
know?
then she's been chased, and she stops to film it.
Yeah, and,
And
like,
yeah,
she's, like, turning the camera behind her while
yeah,
she's running and stuff. It's like, "Mm."
yeah. It has to. Yeah, it has to make sense within that world, really. Um, and obviously, there's some brilliant ones. And I think every time anybody goes, "Oh my god, found footage has been done to death," one comes along that proves it hasn't been. But I think it's the same with every horror genre. Everyone goes, "Oh, zombies are done," and then a brilliant zombie film will
Yeah,
come around, and people go, "Actually, when 28 years later comes out, everyone's going to be all over
yeah,
zombies
yeah,
again."
100%.
Um, have you seen that? The last thing I saw that I thought was really good. Have you seen a film called Mads? It's on Shudder. It's a
No, but
French
it
zombie
is actually
film.
on my,
Ah, yeah,
very good.
and it's not found footage as such. It's a one take film,
Oh, okay.
so it gives you that found footage kind of air, because it's just a single camera following the characters around. So you kind of have all the energy of found footage, but you don't have a device where, oh, somebody was filming the whole thing. Um, and they do it this kind of one take. I'm sure there's cuts in it in various places. But yeah, it's really good.
That
And
needs
and
to be
again, it's a French zombie film shot on one handheld camera. There's a million out there, but suddenly somebody comes and does it well, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
there's
all of a
life.
sudden,
There's
all
life in all of these things.
mhm.
Because I think you mentioned talking about trends, and I think as well as people chasing trends that are popular, one of the big things that gatekeepers will say to you when you're trying to get your film made is, "Oh, that's done," and you're taking your vampire script or your werewolf script, and the gatekeepers will say, "Oh no, vampires are done, zombies are done. Ignore that, ignore that." Because as I said, all it takes is one film to suddenly reignite that. interest. But I think there's a level of horror fan who will watch every zombie film out there, or will watch every
Yeah,
werewolf film
yeah.
out there. So, ignore those people.
If you could team up with any horror icon, director, actor, past or present, is there anyone that sits atop that list?
Oh my god. Oh, I didn't know this question was coming. Otherwise, I'd have thought of somebody. Um,
Doesn't even necessarily have to be in horror, just maybe a filmmaker or somebody that you would love, dead or alive, that, sticks out as like, that's somebody I would have
I,
loved
I
to meet.
mean, I guess with him dying relatively recently, David Lynch was, I think somebody who every filmmaker, even if your films are nothing like what he produced, for expanding the possibilities of what a film could be. Because I think that's kind of many people's first introduction to sort of surrealism, I guess. Because you watch all these movies which are very linear and very this thing happens and this thing happens, and then you suddenly watch a David Lynch film, and obviously anything can happen. And the way he uses obviously music and sound and visuals to create this kind of atmosphere, I think that's many people's first kind of entry into the world that film isn't just about story. It can also be about a mood. It can also be about the music, the visuals, and the mood that evokes. And I think that's what he did was kind of obviously unique, but very important. So even if you're making stuff that is nothing at all like a David Lynch movie, he still opened up to you the possibility of, yeah, but if you put this image with this music, you can create this kind of atmosphere. And it doesn't have to be about what the dialogue says it is.
Yeah. For people who are listening then, that maybe are already fans of yours or, discovering you for the first time, where's the best place that people can kind of keep up to date with everything you're doing?
So my production company is called Paranoid Android Films. So I post most stuff there that I'm producing. So we've got a website, paranoidandroidfilms.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. Just joined Blue Sky. I'm on TikTok, but I'm starting to learn to use it. I'm a bit old for TikTok, but I also know that things need to get on there really. Um, so I'm working with some people who aren't quite as old as me to help me with my TikToking. um, so yeah, Paranoid Android Films. You'll be able to find everything there on
For everybody listening,
whatever social media of your choice.
yeah, so for everybody listening, whether it's video or on whatever podcast platform, all the links to Andy's stuff will be down below in the description anyway. So you can check it out there. So final question now before I let you go is, why horror and what does it mean to you?
Um, I mean, I've literally no idea why it's appealed to me personally, but I think for the for the general world, it's about a way of getting your fears out, um, and exploring them in a safe space. We can explore the darkness of human nature, of the world, of nature, and then after an hour and a half, we're still fine. And I think in today's world, that's kind of more important than ever. And I think you saw that in the pandemic when horror films started to get really popular. And I think the general sort of entertainment industry consensus was people were going to want escapism because they were all stuck in, and then there was a real life horror movie happening outside. And people didn't necessarily want to watch movies about a pandemic, but people wanted to watch horror movies. People
Yeah,
wanted to be scared, and then they wanted it to be over. And that's what a horror movie gives you. And it gives and that's what watching it gives me. And I think with making it as well, this is it's an outlet for darkness. Um, and I think if you're a horror fan and you regularly go to festivals or conventions or screenings or what have you, the horror community is generally a friendly and welcoming place. Um, It's a bit like the heavy metal community. You have an outlet for your darkness, and then you can be quite a chill person the rest of the time. You know, the horror community is generally lovely people, and most horror filmmakers that you meet are generally not dark people. Um, Sometimes you get the opposite with comedians, for example, who have to be funny in their professional life, and then they can be quite dark and depressive in their real life. Whereas horror filmmakers, it's the opposite. We get a way of putting our bad thoughts up on screen, and then hopefully that we can be pretty nice, chill people off it.
Yeah, I've definitely found that. I think all of the nicest people I've met in the last couple of years have all been from the horror community, which
Yeah,
to some people outside of it probably seems counterintuitive. It's like, oh, they're all like psychotic lunatics that are like,
yeah,
aggressive and angry
yeah.
and whatever. It's like, no, it's actually quite the opposite. Some of the most open, genuine, caring people I've met have been through the horror community.
100%. And yeah, we get to sit for an hour and a half watching slaughter and demonic possession, and then come out and we're not those people. Yeah, we
Yeah.
get that all out. And and horror has, especially in recent years, been a very progressive place in terms of filmmakers from different minority backgrounds getting films made, and I'd say much more progressive than kind of standard Hollywood. Even though they like to shout about it more, we're being progressive and inclusive of this, but still mainly rich white guys picking everything. Whereas you know there's a whole series of films on Shudder at the moment by a young trans filmmaker,
Mhm.
um, and that's just the way it is, and people are interested in watching them, because having new voices making films about what scares them is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Coming from a different perspective of your identity and how it relates to what scares you, and what you find horrifying. These are interesting things that we're all interested in.
For sure. This has been a really interesting chat. I look forward to doing it again in the future. I can't wait to see what the rest of this year and into next year kind of, I guess, brings for you and the company and stuff. And yeah, I wish you all the best. And I would love to do it again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a whole. I genuinely don't know what's next at the moment. We've got a whole bunch of ideas, and I'm pitching them out there to try and find money for them. So it's literally whichever one comes.
First.
The money men say, and that's one thing where it's often men. Sometimes there's sometimes money women. The money people say yes to,
Mhm.
and then that's what we're going to make next. But yeah, the idea is to keep making interesting and entertaining horror movies.
I love it. For everybody listening, like I said, all the links will be down below so you can check out all that and keep up to date. And yeah, like I said, it's been a pleasure and I can't wait to do it again.
Right, so definitely.